very much for his help with this presentation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I greatly appreciate it. My presentation has three objectives. The first one is to deal with this brief survey. Okay, is to deal with this brief survey. The second one is the idea of the theory behind positive stress. This is really the theory that underlies my teaching, and hopefully I can convince you that this is a good approach to adapt in this time where we're constantly being asked to adapt as instructors and teachers. Hopefully I can convince you that this might be a good way of approaching this area. And then I want to leave you with 5 practical ways to produce positive stress in the classroom, to make positive things happen using this idea of stress. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Okay, so let's begin. For a quick survey, okay, first question. So this is an easy one. So if a compound has a molecular weight of about 305 and it's you need to know what mass is required to produce a certain amount of a certain concentration of aqueous solution. Okay, so we want to start with an easy question. Okay, so got the answer. Everybody good? Yeah. Okay. Good. It is an easy question, right? So I wanted to start with that easy first easy question. The second one I want to ask. So A, by the way. The second one I want to ask is this: how can you eat glass without getting hurt? Yes, exactly. B. How can you eat glass without getting hurt?
A.
Maybe it's never safe to consume this, right? A window breaks, you don't eat it, right? Okay? What do you think? Okay. One of the things that surprises my students a lot in the food chemistry course is they find out that not only are there glasses in our windows, in our cell phones, in our computers, but there are glasses in the world around us, including glasses that we eat all the time, right? So who likes paletas? Right? Of course. Okay, so in this case, you can consume an edible glass. When we cool foods down, when we make products like ice cream, wonderful products, right? There's a reason why I'm a food scientist. I love food and everything about it. And so when we cool products down, we can form glasses in products, and that keeps products safe. So we start with a question like this that sounds very strange, and we end with something that students hopefully can take away with them and use in their scientific life. Okay, here's another simple one. Okay, you're creating some kind of dried fruit product. Okay, and you notice it browns very quickly. Okay, and so you want to prevent that from happening. So what do you do? Okay, you can decrease the pH. Okay, that's a nice one. What else can you do? Lemon. Okay, why does lemon work? Lemon always works. Okay, lemon always works. If you were to test the pH of a lemon, high or low? Very low. Okay, very low. And then if you were to test the vitamin C content of a lemon, very high. You're getting both at the same time. It's a wonderful, wonderful mix. And so both A and B, right? So I want to ask you, what is the purpose of doing this, okay? Not in the context of this conference, but what is the purpose of doing this in a classroom situation? What is the purpose of first letting you know that I'm going to be challenging you with some questions, and then following up very quickly with those questions or those challenges? What is the purpose of doing that in a classroom environment?
Create positive stress.
This creates positive stress in the students' minds. I want my students to know that I am going to challenge them in the semester. I don't want them to start the semester thinking that this is going to be an easy semester. I don't want it to be easy. I want it to be challenging. I want to tell them that they will get through it if they work very hard and work with me, but I want them to be challenged from the start. Okay, so I want to set the expectation that you will be challenged. And then I want to follow up with that by trying to understand what type of class I have. What type of class I have. One thing I've learned from teaching is that every class I have is different. It does not matter that I've been teaching some courses for 10 years or more. It doesn't matter. Every class I have is unique. And it's because it's made up of unique individuals with unique abilities. Not all of them come into the classroom with the same level of ability. The purpose of a survey like this, which actually will be much longer, not 3 questions, but many questions, the purpose of a survey like this at the very beginning of the semester is to figure out what type of class I have and respond accordingly, to adapt to this class and not to the previous class. It's a new class. I need to be adaptive to them. And so this is the idea. I need to challenge them within the knowledge of where I know those students are. And I see some of my students from last semester over there. So so they know about this stuff. All right. So let me go. All right. So how do you define stress? Let's just get a definition of stress. How do you define stress? Okay, one example could be driving a car in traffic, right? Driving a car in traffic. I can tell you, right? I can tell you because before last year's experience of being here and teaching at Tech, I had never driven on the road here in Mexico. Dr. Montejano lent me his car. He gave me his car for the whole semester. So you can imagine the first time I drove, I was really stressed. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay and do okay, and my family was going to be safe, and the car was going to be safe. So it was a stress, okay? But we can think of stress as a pressure, okay? As a pressure. Anything else?
Challenge.
It's a challenge. Stress can be a challenge. It can be a pressure. It can be a challenge for us, okay? And what I'm hoping that you come away with is that stress is like fire. It's potentially useful. It's potentially very harmful. The way that we employ it and use it is the difference between benefit and harm. Okay? So I think in general, if you were to ask 100 people whether stress is a positive word or a negative word, what do you think they would say? La encuesta nos dice negative, yes, right? That's what they would say. This is a negative word. I hope I can convince you that it's not a negative word. It's more of a neutral word, and it depends on how we employ it, okay? All right. So has anyone heard of the terms hormesis or eustress? Okay? Hormesis or eustress? Yes? Yeah? Okay? Which one?
Hormesis.
Hormesis, okay. What is hormesis? What would you say it is?
It's like when you have a lot of pressure, the pressure could be positive. It's something like that.
So some pressure can produce positive results. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Anyone else? Hormesis. All right. Well, as I say to my students, we're here to find out, okay? So if you don't know we're here to find out, I want to introduce these two terms to you. Here is the concept of hormesis, okay? Here's the concept of hormesis. In the world of biology, this is something that we see over and over again. Small doses of stress, of things that are stressful, that are absolutely in large doses harmful. Toxins, radiation, things of this nature, small doses may actually improve the health of organisms. You can actually give small doses of very toxic compounds, and those organisms will grow faster. So we see that with small amounts of stress that we can actually get some kind of improvement, okay? Snake venom, right? Yes, so we have treatments with venom. We have treatments with snake venom. We have treatments with bee venom. We have treatments with a variety of things that we know are toxic. One of the most effective chemotherapies for a very specific type of leukemia, a very specific type of cancer, is arsenic. So if I ask 100 people, is arsenic good or bad? They would probably respond, probably not good, it's bad, right? It's a poison. It is, but in certain circumstances, with the right dose, it actually is one of the most effective treatments. So I want you to start thinking about this, and maybe a much simpler way to think about this is, did anybody go running today? Anybody go, okay, okay. What is the result of running? What is the physical result of running for your body?
Your muscle fibers start to break up and your heart gets stressed.
The first thing that happens, right, before you get more fit and everything else, the first thing that happens is damage. If we were to take a blood sample immediately after your run, we would find blood cells that had broken apart, because literally when you're doing this, you're smashing them. Really, the bottom of your feet are smashing them. We would find evidence of damage. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. All these things that we think of if you went to the doctor's office as this is not good, but these small doses appear to be beneficial. So that's the biological world, hormesis, okay? I want to introduce you to this term eustress, which is the idea that positive stress can promote growth and accomplishment, which is, I think, what we're here to do, what we're trying to accomplish, that positive stress can promote growth and accomplishment mentally in our educational system. So this idea of hormesis on the biological side, which is the reason why we work out or lift weights or do these other things, and eustress on the educational or the mental side, the idea that this positive stress can promote growth and accomplishment in our lives, in our professional lives, and the lives of our students. So I want to talk to you about the theory of positive stress or the eustress approach. So there are two things that happen when you teach. You learn from hard experience. ECOAS, right? Yes. Okay. So you hear feedback, not all of it positive. Okay. So you learn from that experience. The other part of this is that there are, of course, scientists studying these concepts of learning and how learning occurs most efficiently. So I think it's this presentation is really trying to combine those two things. So I want to talk about the theoretical foundation of this positive stress or eustress approach. And here is a rather old curve. This was first published in 1908. This is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and I'll show you a little bit more applied version of this in a second. But the idea is this: that as we go from very low levels of arousal, being awake and alert, to very high ones, then we can change the level of our performance, right? We can change the level of our performance. So what that means is, of course, right, I would have a very difficult time doing this presentation if I were asleep. But now what I have to do is figure out what is the appropriate level to actually perform this. If I were running laps around this room and huffing and puffing, that's probably too much stimulation to make this presentation work. So that the point of that is that we need to think about what is the right amount of this, okay? And here's a bit of a more applied version, okay? So in going from sleep to alertness, there is an optimal level of stress or pressure that allows us to perform at our very best. There's an optimal level of that. Above and below this, we will not perform at our best, and our students will not perform at their best. Here's the problem. For every person, for the variety of tasks that they do across the day, whether that may be running, or whether that may be working on a math problem or reading a book, there are different levels of stress or pressure that we need to perform optimally, and our students are not all the same. How do we address that? How do we address that we need to individually fit the stress level to each of our students so they perform optimally? How do we do that? By observation, okay? What's a good way to observe? We can observe how everyone is performing. And are there ways that we can do that? How do we know how a student's performing? Okay, so we can look at the level of work they're developing. We can look at their grade average, okay? We can see where they started. We can see how they performed in this survey. If we give them 50 questions or 40 questions related to our discipline, to see where they are, give them something that would be equivalent to a final exam at the beginning, and tell them it's okay, it's just a survey. Don't worry, don't freak out. It's just a survey, it's okay, right? Give them something very hard. We can have a benchmark to figure out where most of our students are and how much stress we can apply to get the maximum out of those students. So this idea of trying to understand what class we have now, not what class we had last time, okay? All right, so we've both seen this. We've seen this happening before in our classrooms, right? We see this happening at every meeting we go to, right? Look around. Right? We see this happening in every meeting we go to. I've heard this before, right? I need to check Facebook, right? So you know, as soon as these come out and people are doing this in the classroom, you know that you've lost them, right? Somehow, what you're doing is not effective. This is a very good tool for telling you that. It says what you're doing is not effective right now because I'm going to do something that I consider to be more important. Okay. Now, the other side of this is that you can see this expression on your students' faces, right? It may be okay to see it a couple of times per semester, but if that is their expression across the semester, that's too much. They're on the wrong side of that curve. They're in distress, okay? So there are two sides to this, and we want to remain as close as possible to the optimum all the time. That means as teachers, we are constantly balancing this idea of stressing out our students too much and boring them. We have to balance that, I think, dynamically across the semester. Okay, we have to try to balance those two things because neither of them are productive. Neither of them are productive. So I don't have the data. I don't have the data here, but it's in the references. There are now studies looking at the biochemistry of this response. Cortisol, stress hormone. If it's elevated slightly, you increase the ability to incorporate into long-term learning. So if you slightly increase that, it's good. If you increase cortisol dramatically, the ability to incorporate into long-term memory is gone. You get into flight or fight response. The students just want to leave. They just want to get out. Okay, so I just want to mention that there is a biochemical basis to that face, to what you see there. Okay, it's not just an expression; it's something that's happening biochemically. So I think we've all seen this Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. But what I want to talk about is the concept of keeping students in this area of where they can learn with guidance. Keeping them in this area, I think this is that optimal area. So what we can do is we can challenge them with something that is, okay, students, just stop listening for just a second. Okay, just cover your ears. All right, Lampa, you too. Yeah, good. Okay, so we can challenge them with something that is too difficult, that we know based on our experience that they can't do, if we have the ability to coach them to do it. So we can challenge them with something that is harder than they can do, and we can coach them to get to that point where they can actually achieve it. Okay? So they can actually expand the zone of they can do things unaided, because ultimately when they leave here, they should be independent. Entrepreneurs, right? They should be able to do things on their own. So that's the idea, is to expand that zone of can do unaided. Right? It should expand as the class goes on. Okay, so that's the idea, is to coach them within this area. And I believe that what we do is coaching. I believe that a lot of what we do is coaching. It's helping those students through those times, motivating them, saying this is going to be difficult, and then coaching them to the point where they can actually achieve those difficult tasks. Things at the beginning of the semester that they could not do, they can now do at the end of the semester. That's the idea. Okay? So second, this theoretical underpinning, so Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. This last one I mentioned because D. Fink, in his taxonomy of significant learning, I think added an important dimension to areas that Bloom and others talk about in their taxonomies of learning. What he said, let me see if I can get this laser pointer to go, there we go. What he said is that in addition to the foundational knowledge, which we are accustomed to giving in classes, we know that there is a base of knowledge that we need to communicate in any of our classes. But part of what we should be about is to teach students about learning how to learn so that they become independent of us. So our goal is that they become independent, right? That they're no longer dependent on us, that they become able to do things on their own. So part of incorporating learning how to learn into our curriculum will help them do that. This idea of applied skills, okay, this idea of applied skills. Let's not give students any assignment that is purely theoretical. Let's give them something that is real, that applies to the real world. In food, I think it's great to see the look on students' faces when we take liquid milk and transform it into yogurt or cheese. That's magical. That's something that's magic to them, especially when they see it the first time. When we take meat and convert it into pork and convert it into ham or bacon, that to them is magical. You see this light in their eyes. Oh my, wow. So you take them from something that's purely theoretical to something that's highly applied and get them to work on that. One of the things that students I see are missing is the idea that once they finish a class, whatever that class is, they often think, we're done. I achieved a good grade, I'm done with that information. So the concept of, in a curriculum, linking what you teach to what is taught in previous courses is very important. To let them know that they shouldn't forget about that microbiology course, because it probably is going to be helpful in later courses. They shouldn't forget about that math course, because it's going to be helpful in later courses. They have to keep putting this information together so that when they walk across the graduation stage, they haven't just got good grades, they've got an education that is integrated. So very important that they be able to do that. There is a human dimension, which I think Tech does a great job of talking about. There's a human dimension and a caring that goes into making courses successful. So I think the concept that we as humans are interacting with other humans, students, and letting them know that we are going to push them. On the one hand, we're going to challenge them, but we care about them. That balance allows them to do more than they would be able to do otherwise. So this is one of the most common comments of students who come out of a class happy, with a smile on their face and successful, is that was really difficult. In fact, I've interviewed some tech students preparing for this presentation, and so one of the things that they liked about tech is that it was so challenging. They don't want it to be easy. They said it was good that it was challenging because they weren't bored. So continue to challenge the students. That's great. We don't want them to be bored with what they're doing. So bring all this together, not just the mechanical parts of planning and those kind of things, but the idea of bringing emotions, because it's a powerful tool and it can be a positive pressure. Bringing emotions into play in the classroom, I think, can be quite helpful in getting students to perform maximally. All right. Next slide, please. I think that ran out of batteries. Thank you. All right. So what we're doing is we're inducing stress. We are getting students, to use a biological term, out of homeostasis. If we do the right thing in the classroom, we are getting them out of their comfort zone, homeostasis, and we're pushing them into a stressful area. Now, whether that becomes distress, where they are making those faces of distress and their cortisol levels are rising and those kind of things, or whether it's eustress, where they feel challenged but not bored, okay? That is going to really depend on how these students are coached, I think, and supported through this, okay? Coached and supported through this process. All right, next slide, please. So I want to give you one example, practical example of what happened when we switched in a lab course from labs that were written and we handed to the students. Okay, today's students, we're going to analyze fat in this food, and next week we're going to analyze something else in this food. So we were teaching a course where we gave the student a set of instructions. It was kind of like cooking, and if you can cook, you're okay. Okay, but is that a good way to prepare students for the real world? They may not be handed by their employer a set of instructions. Their employer may tell them to figure it out for themselves. And so we tried this inquiry-guided approach. Next slide, please. So we tried this inquiry-guided approach in the lab where we took away all the lab handouts. There were no instructions to the students. The instructions were, here are your resources in order to find what you need to do. So here's a food, and you need to analyze it in 5 different ways. Here are the resources that will allow you to do that. Okay, some of them are on the internet, some of them are at your library, some of them are your instructors and your colleagues who you will talk to. But you will not be given a set of instructions. You have to figure that out. Okay? So we took away this set of instructions and we made them figure it out. We made them give us a plan, including a budget. Because students are surprised at how much science costs until they see it. They've never seen a budget. Like, how much does it cost to run a lab? There it is. Now you know. It costs a lot to run a lab, just to buy things to make a lab keep going. So we require them to not only tell us what they're going to do in the lab and do it, but we require them to tell us how much it will cost. And they must come in under budget. They must do that. So we're trying to give them a project as real as possible. Okay? Now, what was the reaction of those students? What was their reaction? Yeah. Okay. We had about 3 weeks of, 3 weeks where if I had measured cortisol levels, I bet they would be pretty high. But after that 3 weeks, the students actually said, I feel more confident. I can do this by myself, right? So we were in the lab to make sure that everything was safe, right? Nobody's going to get hurt. We were in the lab to help, but we weren't going to make any solutions. I told the instructors that were helping me in the course, don't make anything. Students do that. You help them do it, tell them how to do it if they need to, but don't make anything. They will physically do everything in the lab. And they did. And at the end of the semester, what we observed is that their overall grades increased. Okay, their overall grades increased. And something else, right? So we don't have ECOAS, but we have the equivalent of ECOAS. And at the end of that semester, there was a dramatic increase in the students' liking of the course. It was harder. It was much harder, but they liked it because they weren't bored. And what I observed previously, which was when we give them a sheet of paper and say, here are the 10 things you must do to leave this lab, they would do those 10 things as quickly as possible and leave. That was their goal. It was a race. When we said, it's okay, you can leave the lab early today if you want, but by the end of the semester, you're required to be able to do this, they stayed. Extra. In fact, we were looking at our watches like, we really do need to close the lab at some point. They stayed because they really wanted to learn. Okay, so I just wanted to say that that as a practical experiment, this experiment we continue to do. That was 2011, so we've been doing this for the past 5 years, and we've observed that those benefits have been maintained across time. All right, so what I want to leave you with is this, okay? And I think that many of these things, some of these things you may already be doing, but just some suggestions. I break this semester in my mind into things that I want to do before the semester starts. Yes, I think that there's some things that you should have contact with your students before the semester. So before the semester starts, pre-semester, very early in the semester, like day 1, right? Momento cero, right? Day 1, something like that. Mid-semester, late semester, and then the whole semester. Okay, so just a few things, just as suggestions, and I'd like to hear if there's time, how you all are implementing these things. Maybe you're using all of these things already, just suggestions. So let's talk about pre-semester. Okay, let's go ahead, next slide, please. Pre-semester. My suggestion is you send an email. This doesn't take much time. One of the things that I'm aware of, having three children at home and wanting to do my best as a father in addition to being a faculty member, that takes time. Being a father takes time. And so I need to be at home. I need to be with my children. So I need to figure out how to efficiently maximize performance in the classroom and then be home with my family. Those two things. It's a tough balance. So I send students an email before the semester, which takes all of 3 minutes, right? Very short period of time, very short email to say, this semester, you are going to be challenged by what you do. Here's what the course is about. It's going to be very challenging. I want you to prepare yourself. So I'm trying to tell them ahead of time, it's going to be tough. I want them to know that ahead of time, before the semester begins. And then I ask them to do one very simple, basic thing to be ready to do something at the beginning of the first day of that course. Something that should not take them even an hour to do. A very small assignment, maybe just finding information out about the topic. That's it, very small. But I tell them, I want them to be ready on the very first day. I want them to be ready on the very first day. Okay, so that's pre-semester. Again, these are just suggestions, and maybe you're already doing these things, but just as a suggestion. Okay, let's talk about early semester. First day. When they walk into the classroom, the first thing I want to do is start working. I don't want to talk about the syllabus. I don't want to talk about how the course is designed. I want them to start working immediately, as soon as it's time. As soon as that class starts, we will be working to make sure that the students understand that all semester, this is what I expect. We will be working all semester so that they know that from the very beginning that there is going to be challenge. The very first day, I also tell them that it's my job to push them because I care. That's very important, because if you just make a course difficult, then you're just a difficult professor. If you just make a course hard to do, then, okay, well, some professors are easy and some professors are hard. Students group professors into different categories, you know, right? Oh, this is easy, professor. This is a very hard professor. Just prepare yourself. Be ready. They talk to one another, of course, before the semester starts. But if you let them know, right, and you don't have to say it outright, I say it outright. I will push you because I care about you and I want you to be the best. First day. And I start with something challenging like this survey, right? And instead of multiple choice, maybe it's fill in the blank or something that it's harder. Calculations, dilutions, whatever it is that your discipline considers to be somewhat of a challenge, something that will, on the first day, let them know that we're going to actually be doing something that's challenging to you. And tell them that it's just a survey. So something really hard, but don't worry, it's only a survey. I just want to know where everybody is in the classroom, which is true. That's it. I just want to know where they are. So I give them something hard, and then I say, it's okay, you know? And they're fine with it. They don't get stressed. They just complete it, and then I know where my class is to start. I know what class I have to begin with, and then where I need to go from there. So I start class with this final exam, so that at the end, they will have an expectation of how they should perform. That's what I expect at the end of the class. So just call it a survey, right? Just call it a survey. It's fine. Now you have your data to start with. You have your data very quickly to know where they are, and now you can begin with that. So that's early semester, really the first day, okay? First day. Yes, next slide, please. Mid-semester. Ask students what is working and what's not working, okay? Ask them to contribute. And of course, some students, very extroverted, will immediately just say it, right? And some students who are very quiet will never say it, but you can ask them through anonymous surveys to give feedback on what works and doesn't work. You should be prepared to make some minor changes. If your course is set, absolutely set in stone from the beginning of the semester, then what that's going to do at the end of the semester is that's going to potentially decrease the satisfaction of the students, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a better result. So what I'm saying is make a change that doesn't make the class easier, but just make a change to let the students know that you're aware that they're aware that you can be flexible. So make a change for that reason. Very often what happens, and this is in the teaching literature, if you do this at mid-semester, you have a survey and you make a minor change in your course, not to make it easier, but make a change that makes sense to help the students make some change, they will reward you with better evaluations at the end of the semester. So there is documented evidence that works, so this actually helps. And mid-semester, you can actually add assignments, and you may have different opinions on extra credit. My opinion is this: as the classes get higher and higher level, I give less and less extra credit. But what I do is, if I give extra credit, it's at mid-semester, not at the beginning, right? It's at mid-semester, so that if the student says, I need to get this grade. Some students tell me, I need to get this grade to graduate. I say, okay, here's a way to do it. It's going to be really hard, right? It's going to be really hard, but here's a way. So do this if you wish, right? It's voluntary. Do that if you wish, and that can improve your grade, okay? So I don't tell them about that until the middle of the semester, but that increases their motivation. If I do this thing, I can improve my own grade. That improves their independence. All right, so late semester. Next slide, please. Okay, so instead of just lab practicals, which I think are great, to demonstrate that you know how to use this instrument, or you can do this method, or you can make this thing, or work with this process, that's a great way to do it. Another way to do it is to have students make tutorial videos where they have to do that thing, but they also have to write a script, and they also have to produce a video, and they have to think about it not just once, when they're in the lab doing that lab practical, but over and over and over again when they are forced to give you a script, forced to give you an outline, forced to do that practice in the lab or in the classroom or wherever, and then forced to produce the final product. So they have to do something maybe 4 times. So that makes it much more challenging because they get repetition built into it. One other thing I would suggest, if you want students to really, really study very hard, is this. At the end of your course, right, when you may be teaching many courses, right, not just one. At the end of your courses, the end of your semester, one way to rapidly assess their abilities is to make them do a job interview for your area of expertise. Make them dress professionally, make them come in with a resume, make them sit down, and then ask them any question that relates to the semester's content. Anything. Without any notes. With no notes. Right? So they have to be prepared as they would in a job interview. They will study intensively for that. Very intensively, because that interview stress is very different from a written exam stress. And you very rapidly know which students understand the important information about the entire semester and which students do not. It's a very fast way to assess at the end of a semester. Okay? So I would just suggest that you consider it. Okay? Consider that idea. Okay, so that's late semester. All right, one more. All semester. All semester, I would suggest that you use embedded questions to figure out how individual performance is going, right? Because we look at grade averages, and that's very simple and easy. Does everybody know what an embedded question is?
Nope.
Okay, an embedded question is the idea that you can take a question and tag it as a part of a class. And this gets back to those 3 questions at the beginning. I had a calculation-based question. So if I want my students to do well in lab-related calculations, I would tag that question as calculation-based. Okay, so that's one type of question. I would have other questions that were theory-based. So I would have maybe calculation-based questions, and every time on an exam or on a quiz or whatever that I wrote a question, I would just tag it. This is a calculation-related question. This is a concept-related question. This is an application-related question. So that then I could easily look down the row of questions and average not only get the exam average, but I could see how every student is doing on concepts, on application, on calculation, on any of those things, instead of just looking at their grade average, which is not really, it doesn't really help me as much. Okay? So it's a much better way, more detailed way of getting information from your students, and you just have to tag the question. You're writing the same questions, right? So this doesn't take a huge amount of extra time. It's just tagging the questions and then averaging those to see how are students doing it on calculations in general, on concepts in general. So that's one. Have students prepare their own study guides. So for most of my courses, I tell the students they can come to class with 1 or 2 or 3 pages that they write by their own hand. They can come with 1 or 2 or 3 pages of information to that exam, okay? But they will turn it in with the exam. So it stays with the exam. And they can put anything that they want on there. They can put anything that they want on those pages. And then what I do is, on the exams, most of the questions are application related. Something that you can't Google. Okay? Like, what is pH? That's an insulting question. I would never ask that on an exam. How do you use pH to change this or that about a process or a system? Okay, that's hard to Google. So even if a student, right, clandestinely were to have their phone or whatever and look up an answer, it's kind of difficult. It's not there. Google can't tell you that. So the idea is that they can put all of those basic concepts in their study guide. They study very hard, actually, when they do that. It's written study. That's very hard studying. It's good. And so then they come to the exam and apply what they've learned. So use exams as learning experiences. One thing that I think is very helpful is if students come out of the exam having learned something, not just giving back information that you gave to them. So one exam question that I really liked was a set of researchers. I thought this was a very interesting idea. A set of researchers in Italy wanted to know what was the drug and pharmaceutical use in Venice. They asked that question, right? And so, of course, they went around and they did a survey of everybody in Venice, and everybody answered truthfully, right? No. They went to the wastewater plant, and they measured the wastewater. And they were able, actually, to determine all of the pharmaceuticals and other compounds in that plant. In that plant that were downstream of Venice, that were around that area, and figure this out, right? Get an idea, get an estimation, okay? So that we use that case study and ask students to do calculations around that kind of idea, so that they came to understand, oh, you can do things in very unique ways in science. Okay, so they came away knowing something new that they didn't know before. So case studies are very helpful to be adapted into effective exam questions. You can give students a choice of exam questions. So you can give them a limited number, right, of exam questions, and then say, just get rid of the one you don't like, right? Just get rid of the one you don't want to answer. Why do I do that? Because the next exam, they will have to answer a question like that. I find out what questions the students don't like on the first exam. It's on the second exam, and the third exam, and the final exam, until they learn it. So I want to know what question they cross out. I keep track of that, right? And then I ask them over and over and over again until they learn it. So after we assure safety, after we make sure that the students are not going to set the lab on fire or anything else, after we do that, students should make mistakes. This is how we've learned, right? In our careers. I think of all the mistakes that I've made, that's really where I learned a huge amount, right? That's where I learned, is making those mistakes. So I want to encourage you to make a safe environment for your students, and then let mistakes happen, and then they will learn. And then when they do make a mistake, make them write about it. Make them write about what they did and how to fix it. And it will go into their long-term memory. Finally, use stories to illustrate key ideas. This can make the entire semester work. If you start with a story from the very beginning of the semester, and that story goes through the whole thing, for instance, students in my introductory food science course join a company. They didn't realize they were joining a company when they signed up for the course, but they joined a company, and they were a part of a company. They were employees in the company. And we talk about that all the way through. We have meetings, right? We have company meetings, and all those kind of things. We have a theme or an idea that goes the whole way through the semester. Okay, so just some ideas, just some simple suggestions that hopefully are helpful. Okay, all right. So now let me ask the question: have we accomplished the stated objectives? Survey? Yeah, have we done the survey? Okay. Theory behind positive stress. Okay, did that, and 5 practical ways to cause positive stress. So I think we've accomplished the stated objectives for the presentation. And next slide, please. I just want you to think about this. So how many of these approaches have you applied in your teaching? I'm not saying you need to apply every one of these approaches for every single class, but how many of these have you applied? And have they worked? So what have you applied?
To learn from making a tutorial or something like that by themselves, and so on. It's a very, very delicate point that you are proposing, and well, it's a question, but probably later.
Yeah, I think we're about okay for time. 2 minutes. Yeah, we can ask a question. I think if you want. I think this is.
Okay, I think it's really interesting what you are proposing and everything. And now, in a very intuitive way, we have guessed what you are proposing. So it's very like ensuring to know that there's theory behind those things that we have felt. But one of the most difficult things to handle is that there's a very tiny balance to find to this positive stress, because if you depasses it, it's going to be like a mess and catastrophic. And sometimes in tech, everything is thinking that it's making good stress, but when you sum 6 different subjects making good stress, it starts to be stressful, just stressful. So how could you tell us about finding the good balance in good stress and avoiding to think that it's positive what could be messy?
Okay, that's a great question. So finding the balance between good and bad stress in classes. So I think there's 2 parts to this. One is that you can actually talk and communicate with the students. You can see that look on their faces, so you know in your class if they're experiencing bad stress or good stress on an individual basis. The other thing, and what I'd like to encourage is talking to the other instructors, because in order to let the students understand that you really want to integrate, if you are talking to other professors, just to say, what are you doing, or can we go to lunch, right? Take the other professor to coffee or lunch. Take me to coffee, I like coffee. So take the other professor to coffee or lunch, ask them how they're doing and how it's working. And if the students know that you're doing that and you're trying to actually make adjustments, they will respond positively. So talking not just about your own class or to students about your own class, but actually talking to other faculty, I think is important. I think this is part of the reason why we're here, is to do that. But I think within a student's curriculum, you can actually talk to the other faculty. Sometimes I call them or email them or something to find out if the student is experiencing the same stress in their course as in mine. So maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm overstressing my students, or maybe the student is just overstressed in general. So I need to find that out. And that's a really good question. I think there's 2 sources. It could be me, and it could be that all of their curriculum and their life, maybe they're overstressed in general. So I try to figure that out during the semester and respond accordingly. Yeah. Yes. So any other approaches that you've applied in your teaching that have been helpful and useful? Yeah.
I really like to use the introductory survey technique, that it helps me to get to know what the students are and helps my students to realize that we have to do something.
Okay, so the use of an introductory survey, okay, the use of an introductory survey just to find out where your students are, right? Right, and to push them, right? And you can even ask questions about them. And very often at the end, then there's some question about what do you like? What are your hobbies? What do you do when you're not in class? What sports do you like? To let them know that you're a real human being, and tell them, well, I like this. I like coffee and chocolate and swimming and whatever it is that you like, so that they understand that you are a real human being outside of class as well. Yeah. Kim?
Gabriel, this is something a little bit different. I would like to ask you, how do you as a teacher manage stress? Because it's kind of difficult when you are doing all this for your students, and then which are your tools as a teacher?
Okay, so how do I manage stress as a faculty member and as a person? So I would say my first answer is dynamically. Meaning that it's impossible for me to be 100% dedicated to one of those parts of my life all the time. So what I try to do is, first, I try to focus on monotasking. I think our world is consumed with the idea that the human brain can actually do multitasking, and I totally disagree. I think that we're very good as humans as monotaskers. Even if we focus on something for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, we can get good productive time out of that and then move to another subject. So I think one is effective monotasking and not trying to do everything at the same time, which is going to just increase your cortisol levels and nothing's going to get done. Another thing is that I try to make sure that I'm balancing my work life with my outside of work life, that I'm paying attention to my family, that I'm interacting with my friends, that I'm involved with my church, that I'm doing things that are totally outside of school. Because what I find is, if I do something that is completely independent of the classroom, so my solution on a weekly basis is on Saturdays, I don't work. That's the rule. There's no work. I don't check emails. I don't respond to emails. I don't do any work on Saturdays. That may mean that I work harder Monday through Friday and half a day Sunday. I will not work on Saturdays. That's it. That's my rule. I spend all day with the family. I do whatever we're going to do. That's it. There's a rule. And so that keeps me sane. And the other part is, and this may not be the same for everybody, I go to the gym. So typically, as soon as I finish whatever is the most stressful part of my day, a long lab or something, or what have you, I go immediately to the gym. I spend an hour there. I put it on my watch, exactly an hour. When I come back, I'm calm again, and I can refocus. So I make a point of regular exercise for that purpose. So I guess I would say making sure that I have a life outside of my work, making sure that one day a week I don't work, at least, and then trying to make sure that I'm using known ways of reducing stress. Okay, known ways of reducing stress, which for me would be exercise and things of that nature. So I hope that helps. Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard. So, all right. So I think that's time. Okay, so I think I have just one more slide. So I do want to thank you for your attention. I know it was a long presentation. I hope you weren't too stressed about it. But anyway, I really want to thank you for allowing me to come and talk with you. This is wonderful to be able to meet with other faculty and just talk with you about how you're teaching. I absolutely love this. So thank you very much for your time.
Agradecemos muchísimo al doctor Harris por la ponencia y invito a Jorge Rocha, nuestro director, que por favor comparta un reconocimiento y al mismo tiempo un pequeño